All right. Good morning. Happy Tuesday. We are February the 17th. Hope everybody's having a good morning so far. I am Dr. Sarah Morrissey. I am a doctor of pharmacy. I am an integrative health practitioner with Winning Wellness, and I'm a pharmacist that works for Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy, where we do bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, specialty compounding, and we believe in healing the body, helping the body do its thing without using long-term medications per se, right? We believe in sleep, diet, exercise, and those foundational key things in order to keep our bodies as healthy as possible. So, welcome to the live Q&A. It's always good to be here. And so I'm just going to kind of dig in. I've had a few questions in the last week and had some discussions with a few clients of mine with the health coaching and health strategy coaching in regards to, blood sugars. And I kind of think that blood sugar is probably one of the most overlooked health markers. I know that we talk a lot about it, but I feel like unless you're diagnosed, and I use air quotes for that, with diabetes, people just kind of fly under the radar. They don't really worry too much about their blood sugar, or if it falls within normal limits on a lab, so be it. Keep doing what you're doing and carry on with life as is, and, consume what you want to until there's a problem. Well, I feel like the more we learn, and the more we learn that we don't know, and the more we need to learn more. So, I do believe that blood sugar is probably one of the most overlooked health markers. And, especially after being a retail pharmacist for many years, we dispensed a ton of medications, right? Like, oh, you don't have your blood sugar under control. Here's a medication, right? How many times has the doctor really talked to you about what have you been eating, right? What does your day look like? What, how do you consume your food? What is your sleep like? What are all those things, right? And we talk about that a lot here on all of Sean and Janet's podcasts. And just kind of looking at all of our health from a more, whole human-centered approach, right? So, but yeah, there's so many medications out there. But I want to discuss blood sugar not from a diabetes standpoint, right? I just kind of want to come at it from the different angle, not from diabetes management, but really about creating more of a metabolic, stable lifestyle, right? Creating that metabolic stability. And so I think that's very important, especially, for longevity, right? So, and blood sugar regulation, it affects every system in the body, and whether or not you have a diabetes diagnosis, your level of blood sugar control or insulin sensitivity is directly correlated to your overall health. So I think we just need to start having more of those conversations, not from a disease standpoint, but from a, natural daily living standpoint. So that's kind of where I want to go, and just kind of give you guys some information about that. Because increasingly, right? Like I talked to quite a few, patients in the last couple of weeks, they've got these normal labs, but they still have all these symptoms of metabolic instability, right? So it's not about fear. It's really about just learning the physiology of the human body. So that's what we get to do here. And so just kind of, take a moment and think about that, right? How many of us experience an energy crash in the afternoon, right? Between 2 and 4 p.m. on most days of the week. Do you experience that? Oh man, I just ate, I'm really tired. What does that look like for you? But I mean, I know I've lived it personally quite often, right? But knowing that that's really just your body telling you that, things are not very stable, even though it's normal, right? How many times you just go and get a coffee after lunch, right? To have that pick me up throughout the day. So we tend to think that that's normal because everybody's feeling that way. Well, but that fatigue, that afternoon fatigue that so many of us experience, that is a physiological signal. That is your body giving you a hint of, hey, pay attention. Maybe we're not eating the right things. Maybe we're not, allowing our body to do its job the best way. So that's just kind of one of the first hints of that instability. So, right. So those afternoon crashes, what we think is normal, it's not normal. That's our body giving us a nice little signal. So just something to think about there. So, in a little history, I guess, about what is going on with our bodies, right? So when we consume carbohydrates, right, everything kind of gets broken down, from the carbohydrates to the glucose molecule, right? So therefore, your blood glucose will rise. The pancreas, it releases insulin, right? And that's insulin's job is to take the glucose out of the bloodstream, move it into the cells, right? That is normal physiology, right? Insulin moves the glucose out of the blood into the cells, and that's how we get energy production, right? But when most of our meals are consisting of refined carbohydrates, not nature's carbs, but refined carbohydrates, low amounts of protein, our bodies are fairly overwhelmed with chronic stress. And then that leads to the chronically elevated cortisol, right? And then poor sleep. It, doesn't take very many evenings of poor sleep to really affect your blood sugar. And so, therefore, when all of those things are combined, you've got the body releasing more insulin than is actually needed, right? So which creates a sharp spike. Then we have a big crash. What happens when we crash? We get, quite often we have that shaky or jittery feeling. We've got the sugar cravings, right? Because we're craving more and more sugar, fatigue, right? The afternoon fatigue that I already just talked about. Irritability, hangry anybody? Brain fog, anxiety, right? All of those things, needing that pick me up, whatever, all that stuff. It is literally a biochemical roller coaster. I thought that was a great analogy, right? Because we're just constantly going up and down. And, you feel great and then you don't. Then you feel great and then you don't. So those are all signals, right? That is just our body's way of giving us the signals. So I just invite everybody to, really take a listen. Take a listen to what your body does after you consume your choice of nutrition, right? So, and as a pharmacist, this is where we start seeing people that are medicated, right? Medicated for these symptoms, right? Oh, you have anxiety. Oh, your brain fog. Oh, you're depressed. You don't feel very good. Oh, you're a little irritable. Oh, your family doesn't like being around you right now, right? And so people end up getting put on meds because of these symptoms, when really, if we just back the bus up and start controlling our blood sugar, all those symptoms start going away, right? And so, I mean, that's just one of the many opportunities for polypharmacy. You get that the fatigue, and the irritability and all of that, right? And so it's a horrible little roller coaster, right? And so when it really just traces back to that unstable glucose. So lots of thoughts there. So so a lot of, and I've already just kind of mentioned, a lot of the common presentations, right? How does this look? who could benefit from improving their blood sugar stability, right? Okay, well, people that have the mid-afternoon energy crash, right? I feel like that is the one that encompasses, I would say, everybody at one time or another, right? Waking up between 2 and 4 a.m. I know we talked about a little bit about this last week. That's a signal there. Cravings for more and more sugar, right? The more sugar you crave, and it just kind of keeps repeating the roller coaster cycle. So that's a big one there. Difficulty losing weight, right? You're doing everything right. You think you're doing everything right. And so that's kind of one of and there's a lot of components to that, I think, as well. But at the same time, when our insulin is overworked, you're not going to lose the weight especially not in a healthy fashion. So the brain fog, irritability when, your meals are delayed. Who's been hangry before? Yeah. Sign me up. And so we just need to, pay attention to those. And the thing of it is that the majority of those people that have any of those presentations, nobody meets the diagnostic criteria for a diabetic, which is great. But the body is still telling us that it is not handling glucose properly. And so just take that to heart there, right? We can't just simply ignore all these patterns and all these presentations just because the labs don't fall in range. So that's kind of where that lands. So going back to the hangry, right? Maybe you guys can give me a like or something if you've ever experienced that hangry feeling. I've been wondering why I wasn't getting the comments. That's because I didn't have it on showing up here. So awesome. Good to see everybody. I thought everybody was getting awfully quiet there. So good target range for fasting insulin. Do you mean fasting blood sugar? Insulin is probably one of the most important markers. We want it as low as possible, right? We want it under, I think ideally it'd be under 7. And that would be really good. Your ideal fasting glucose, 70 to 90. And so those are all kind of good markers there. I was listening to one of the previous podcasts that Sean and Janet did with a gentleman that wrote a really cool book. And one of the statements that he said that the majority of people that are diabetics and on diabetes medications, the majority of them have an A1C still over 7. And when that means that their average blood sugar is over 154 milligrams per deciliter? Yeah. And that's high, right? Like that just starts increasing the damage, to the body and to the cells, right? So, Brian, good question. I've heard it all starts with the guts. What we put in is what we get out of it. Eat healthy, get healthy results. Eat bad, get bad results. Can't exercise out of a bad diet. Everything is so true, right? It all starts really with our hand and what we put in our mouth. And, because there's a lot of rabbit holes I can go down on there, especially when I talk about like cravings, right? When our gut is out of balance and we're craving, certain foods and stuff like that, a lot of that is the gut speaking to our brain saying, we need more glucose, we need more sugar, feed me more sugar and easy sugar. And so that's very true. And so, yes, it does all start in the guts, right? Because that's where we're going to absorb it, right? We also need to chew our food better, right? The better we chew our food, the better we get the enzymes working in the mouth to start the proper digestion, so that by the time it hits the stomach, and hopefully an acidic stomach, because that's what it's supposed to be physiologically, then it's prepared and ready for the pepsin to do its job. And then it goes into the small intestine and all those things, right? So, so many pieces of the puzzle, but they're all connected. It's all the same puzzle. And so, yeah. Actually, I have another question about low carb, keto, or intermittent fasting. Whole foods. Whole foods is my thing. It's, if you're on a diet, nothing is really ever sustainable. Find something that's sustainable, something that is nourishing, right? We want to think about making sure we're getting as much variety as possible. In the Northern Hemisphere, that variety is going to look different than somebody that lives in the Caribbean, right? So, and just, be truthful to that. I do like intermittent fasting. I think that has a lot of benefit. I also, and I've talked before about how we really do need to give our bodies that 3 hours minimum between meals. And I know it's hard for us because I feel like a lot of us also grew up in the, let's snack. We can be grazers. Well, guess what? We're not grazers. It has done nothing for our bodies over the last 30 years of grazing. And so, and I know I feel a lot better, when I'm at work, when I, have my breakfast, I have my lunch, and I have my dinner. I feel way better throughout the day than, say, if I'm at home and I'm looking for a snack or, doing things like that. And so it's, I think intermittent fasting is great. I think you also need to do what's right for your body in the intermittent fasting. Men can intermittent fast different than women do. So take the time to look into that. Because I know there's a lot of couples out there where, they're doing this intermittent fasting. Husband loses, 20 pounds, no problem. And then the wife just gained 5 more, and they're eating the same thing and they're doing the same things. But the timing of the fasting was not good for her body, right? It was, so, and everybody's different, but there are a lot of good resources out there for how women could ideally fast versus how men fast. So lots of information out there to look into. So carrying on, why, and I've kind of touched on it already, right? Like, so why does glucose control matter in the long term, right? Because those, what do we got? Just a second. Of course, there we go. So I've got a question, side note, I guess, on Hashimoto's, become allergic to thyroid meds. I tried low dose, I'll check some names in. Okay, so yeah, so it looks like there's a lot of, I've got a question on TikTok, person having Hashimoto's, allergic to thyroid medications, which is an interesting allergy. Also using other medications. So yeah, probably a lot of root cause healing that needs to go on. Honestly, I would suggest looking into more functional labs just to see more of the imbalances. Maybe there's something else going on, gut health, overall gut health. And so everything's kind of tied in. Allergies, I guess it would be interesting to learn what type of allergy we have to the medication. And just there's a lot of things to discuss there, but I think there's a lot more going on than just that. And so getting to the root of that, finding the imbalances, looking at the gut health, minerals and metals, maybe we have a heavy metal issue. We don't know, but I really like testing and not guessing. So there's that opportunity as well. So you can certainly send me a private message if we want to discuss that a little further as well. So all good things. So back to some glucose, long-term glucose control. Why is it important? So that we don't have long-term compensatory hyperinsulinemia, right? Too much insulin resistance, right? And when we think about it, insulin is also the fat storage hormone, right? So it's very ironic that not only are we treating diabetics with insulin, which in a type 1 that would, be very important, but when we're treating type 2 diabetes, that is already a metabolic issue, and then for some of them where we're adding in insulin because they just can't get controlled. Now we're adding in more insulin that the body still isn't utilizing very well. And now we're still promoting more fat storage, right? And if we've got more fat storage, it's this whole big cycle of the more fat we have, the more toxins we have, the harder it is on our cardiovascular system, the harder it is on our musculoskeletal system. Everything is, being challenged. So, inflammatory signaling, right? So a lot more inflammation throughout the body, not like, oh, I've got a sprained ankle and I have this swelling, but it's actual like the inflammation within the gut, inflammation within all your blood vessels, things like that. And when we've got all that inflammation, that's when we get damage to the areas, and then our body does the whole cascade of trying to heal itself. And then there's medications that try to prevent that as well. So things to think about there. And then it also leads to hormonal disruption, right? When we've got increased visceral fat, we've got the insulin resistance, we've got inflammation, we've got hormone disruption. Have I mentioned that it's all connected and that it just leads to very damaging insulin resistance? And so that is why it is important, even though if you're not a diabetic, even if your labs are within normal, keep an eye on what you're putting in your body, keeping an eye on your blood sugar. So important. And so, once again, cardiovascular risks, your cognitive performance, right? So the brain fog, how alert you are throughout the day. Those are big things, right? And that's a metabolic issue. And so we want to help that out as best we can. So how about for those that wake up between 2 and 4 o'clock in the morning? What do you think is going on? I feel like that has also, not only with the drowsiness from the, 1 to 3, 2 to 4 p.m., but when we're waking up between 2 and 4 a.m., right, it can be a combination of things, right? Your stress, your hormones. Is it just aging? Is that what you think it is? Well, once again, it often corresponds to the nighttime glucose levels, right? The glucose dips, and then that triggers cortisol. Oh my gosh, we need more sugar, right? And then voila, we're wide awake, right? Because we've stimulated our cortisol. And so, and if we're not getting a good night's rest, our insulin doesn't work very good the next day, and the saga continues. So, I hope we're kind of getting the point of how important our insulin control, our blood sugar control, all of those things are in our life. Because metabolic health is foundational health, right? And it drives everything in our body. So, and just like Brian said, you can't exercise out a bad diet. You also can't out supplement unstable blood sugar. And so that's important. There's so many supplements out there. Take this, take that. Oh, there's a medication for that. When really, if we bring it back down to foundations and what we're putting in our body, that's going to make the biggest difference. So when speaking about a lot of those foundational corrections that we can do for our body, protein is important, and not just one egg, right? One egg is great, but in reality, it's only 5 to 6 grams of protein. It's the very complete, very whole food. Love eggs. But, we're trying to get 20 to 30 grams of protein in a meal. That seems to be the key number that everybody's using nowadays. And I think it's good, right? Because number one, you feel a lot more satiated when you do have a good quality source of protein in your meal. And protein also helps slow the glucose absorption, right? So you're not going to get as big of a spike. Pairing your carbs. There's a lady out there. She's a French biochemist and doctor, whatever. Never eat naked carbs. And so always make sure your carbs have fiber, have protein, and some nice healthy fat, right? So I think that's why we like eggs so much, is because it is such a balanced, with the fat, and the protein is really good in an egg. Avocados are amazing, ghee, stuff like that. So all good things for a good fat source. Movement after meals. I know I've talked about this before. I feel like we all have, but guess what? How many of us are doing it, right? How many of us are getting up from the dinner table and stepping outside and going for a 10-minute walk? I try to. Does it happen every time? Not really, but it's, I probably walk more often after I eat than I ever used to. And, and that's a start, right? But I also know that I feel so much better after doing that, right? And the reason we want to do that is because it improves the sugar uptake in our body. It doesn't really need insulin for the muscle cells to take up that glucose, right? It is being used for an energy source. Insulin doesn't need to help it along. And so that's why it makes such a big difference in your blood sugar levels, but it also, once again, is helping out insulin, giving insulin a break, because insulin is overworked. We all overwork our insulin. So we can do better on that. Sleep optimization. Once again, I don't think there's a podcast that we ever talk on that we don't address sleep and how utterly important good sleep is. And so with poor sleep comes poor insulin sensitivity. So that's just a fact. So once again, get the best sleep you can. And stress control. Going back to cortisol, good old cortisol, right? Because it increases the circulating glucose in our body, right? Chronic stress over time leads to insulin resistance. Your body gets tired. Insulin just keeps getting overworked, right? So, and that's a fact. So whatever we can do on a daily basis to do something for ourselves to help alleviate stress. Is it breath work? Is it going literally for just a nice walk? Not a power walk, not, whatever, but just a nice walk to help calm the body. Maybe we're getting up in the morning and doing a meditation or some gentle movements to get the day going, right? So whatever that looks like for you, I highly recommend you do it. Taking 30 seconds to 2 minutes before you get out of your car, before you go into work. Taking a couple breaths, right? That all those things help regulate the nervous system. And so a lot of this and a lot of what we do comes from our lack of regulation of our nervous system. So, the more we can do to honor that, the better off we are. So these are not extreme measures, foundational metabolic cornerstones, and, and not trends, right? We're staying away from trends. We don't need to go down the trendy road. We just need to honor our body and help balance it. So, so once again, just kind of going over these things all over again, right? Emphasizing, that if you or someone are experiencing, right, energy instability, the highs and lows through the day, weight resistance, irritability between meals, poor concentration, you're exhausted, you're anxious, you've got the brain fog, any of those things, maybe it's time to take a look at our blood sugar. Take a look at what we're doing. You can have your doctor go and do some labs and, simple, A1C, even though it's an average, it gives you a good little baseline, right? But insulin, making sure you're getting your insulin measured as well. That one is huge. And a lot of doctors don't do that. So just FYI, make sure if you get an A1C, also get your insulin as well. And knowing that, you're not broken, right? It's not a character issue, especially like, the hangry, the anxious, the irritability, and that chronically building over and over time, right? It's just that your physiology, your body is responding to what you're putting into it. And so when we know that, we can do better for it. So I highly recommend we start looking at that, stabilizing those glucose patterns. Once we get all that stabilized, you start seeing all the improvements across all of your bodily systems. And it's not because we treated the symptoms with a medication, right? It's because we supported the underlying metabolic function. So that's the big thing, right? Like, let's support our body. Let's build it up so that we don't have these symptoms that, needs treated, right? We can always dig deeper on those things. So, and I believe that my patients, my clients, everybody, everybody out there, we deserve to have the education about how our bodies work, right? So many of us don't know. None of us have been educated about it as far as just the general public, right? You go to your doctor, you trust what they're going to say. But I really highly encourage you, ask the questions, right? Ask the questions to find out more about why your body's doing what it's doing, Like, if your labs are normal and you don't feel well, do you just stop asking questions? Quite a few people do, right? They say, oh, well, my labs are normal. My doctor doesn't have anything for me. Well, we can't just always treat the labs. We have to treat the person. And so if you're feeling that way and your doctor refuses to do anything for you, either get a new doctor or, come talk to us, find a practitioner, find a health coach, find somebody that can help you get to the root of it. And so that's what I'm really enjoying about my job right now and, in my coaching business. And so it's just been a lot of fun getting to that root cause and creating the awareness, giving the education, empowering you to start taking care of your health. So, yeah, because if you found yourself shaking your head, nodding in agreement that, yes, I have felt this way, this blood sugar stability is only one of the foundational pieces of metabolic health, right? It's just one of them. And it just has such a huge influence on everything. So just know that there's always something that we can work on. And that's the thing, right? We're like layers of the onion, we work on stuff. We're always working on something, right? We don't just get to a point in our life and say, aha, we're here. We're going to stay here. It is a daily practice, right? Living is a daily practice. So let's live it the best we can. So, but yeah, so I like to help everybody in, looking at all of these patterns, looking at their comprehensive lifestyle, right? Diet, their exercise, eliminating stress, looking at the toxins, looking where we live and what we surround ourselves with, how much rest we're getting, always important. Stress, or the sleep is the most important. Our emotional well-being. Yes, there's a time for supplementation, but having that mindset and the success mindset is huge. And so I highly recommend everybody work on those things. And if you need help with them, let me know. Because guess what? Informed patients, informed clients always make better health decisions, right? The more we know about our bodies, the better we can do for them. So I hope that you all enjoyed my rant today. I really appreciate the questions. Good to see everybody on here. And holler at me if you have any questions, any concerns, any things you want to work on. You can find me at MLR at Moses Lake Professional Pharmacy. I am one of the pharmacists there. I am also a health strategy coach. And so winningwellnessllc.com is my webpage. So you can go there, check that out, and you can talk with me there. And other than that, I will see everybody next Tuesday. Always grateful to be able to share some education, because just like Sean and Janet say, we are here to educate and empower people to take care of their own health. And I am just glad to be a part of that team. So thank you all and have a lovely rest of your week.